Hi, I'm Peter Souza, and this is 20 Things I'd Tell Myself If I Was Learning Cypress for the First Time. Embrace the Cypress way. Don't fight the queue. This concept was a little hidden to me initially because I was used to doing things the hard way. Here is a little example. Here we can see it's undefined. So expect first title to equal alpha. So we're getting this to-do list first element label and calling it element. And then the element text should equal first title. And this is defined within a scope here. So first title is defined here, assigned here, first title to equal alpha, which is what we entered for one of our to-dos. This will be undefined. On the other hand, invoke works as expected. So we get the to-do list here, invoke text, alias as first title, get the first title, then get the first to-do label, and we expect the label to have text alpha, which it does. And here we can see why that is. Get first title, which is aliased here, then we are getting first title, calling it title, getting the first to-do list item, finding the label, and comparing that label to our previously assigned alias first title here. Success. Part 2, follow Philip and Gleb. Shout out to both of you. There are a lot of great creators out there, but Philip and Gleb are consistently active on LinkedIn and YouTube. I would recommend following them for regular updates and regular content. Here he is, Gleb. Give him a follow, subscribe, check out his videos, find him on LinkedIn, find his website. You'll be glad you did. Here's Philip. Does a lot of great work. Follow him on LinkedIn, go to his website, check out his courses. Great stuff. Obviously, it's useful to follow them and see them, but the real way you're going to get value, creating your own documents. We used to call these notes back in the day. Take notes. The app we're going to use today is a to-do app built by Gleb. You can find it here. I've taken it and I've added a few things to it. Cypress is not just for end-to-end. So Cypress does a lot of great things now, especially with version 15 coming out more recently. I use Cypress for testing APIs. I also use it for accessibility, but it can be used for really quick integrations when you're running a smoke test with something, just doing a little signal check back and forth. Here is a quick example of what that could look like. Verifies to-dos API. So you're going to see that the API keys are present as expected. New to-do here. So this is going to use the API to directly add something. And here's that test. Before expect 200 to equal 200. There's array to be an array. Expected object to have these keys, which it does. Success. Here we are. Request, visit, find the label with API created to do. Expect it to be visible. There it is. Selector superpowers. Within and find are really handy. Within is great if you want to make multiple assertions on a UI element that is repeated and not distinguished in the DOM with any attribute. So, for example, a table, if there are multiple tables on the page and there are no distinct HTML attributes between them, all you have to work with is a table title. Then you can target that table title and do dot within and run your comparisons and assertions within that one table to make sure you're getting the right table. Find is good for single assertions. Get the parent, find child, should exist, right? Or should have text. Easy. Here's a good one. Scopes actions to the first to-do only. So we are finding the first to-do. This usually I would reverse. If we are trying to target a specific to-do, I would target the actual to-do text But if we're testing something like alphabetical order, we want to make sure that the to-dos are in alphabetical order, then it's acceptable to target the first to-do and verify that it has the title that would be first when ordered alphabetically. And I just use this because it was quick. So within that first to-do, we can make these assertions here, right? There's only one. And a dot find, here you can see a single assertion for the dot find. We're getting it again. There it is. Here is, see, get within, check the assertion. There could be multiple here. You could check all the different elements, the checkbox, the text, the delete. You could check all of that within one element. And here's dot find, get dot find. There's a single assertion. See how this is sort of indented? This is a single assertion. Select what the user sees with dot contains. I like this one because it actually targets what the user is seeing. So instead of using a class name, right, you can do that, but this sort of kills two birds with one stone here. So you're verifying the UI text also. This could also be tied to your manual test cases. So if your automation fails because this wording has changed or been removed, then you will also need to update your manual cases. And if you are using some kind of reporter or some kind of software linkage that marries your front end automation tests to your manual tests, this will be handy. Also, I've experienced breaking changes with Bootstrap. Unfortunately, this caused a whole day-long regression of almost the entire platform to verify that nothing was detrimentally altered, basically. 6. Data CY. This is a controversial one, but this is my view. Use sparingly. The standards are often sufficient and sometimes more beneficial, as we just discussed. Typically, these data tags don't do anything for the front end. It's just more clutter, really. If a web platform is compliant, if you've worked on compliance, you'll have plenty of selectors, and they'll be descriptive and accurate. If it's necessary to add attributes like data CY, try to use them as a last resort and work with the team, work with developers, gather opinions, because this is going to turn into a dual team effort where engineering has to be aware of these, engineering has to be aware that they're not supposed to delete them or move them, and QA and engineering may have to come to some kind of formal agreement on who maintains them or when they should be removed. It's a lot easier to have a quick meeting and propose adding these to the platform than it is to have another meeting and decide who's going to maintain them or delete them. So this is a last resort. Writing smarter tests. Use JavaScript variables and logic with .then. This has been really helpful for me. There are a lot of times when I'll need to count the number of objects or verify text or use a number from something like cy.getElement, invoke text, then text. This has been useful for automating form fill out, because I'll need to get an element, invoke its text, or invoke some other attribute, invoke label, then take that label, take that text, and do something else with it. Run it through a loop, whatever it is. Here's a little example. Grabs to-do text, processes it, and asserts. Get the first label, call it text to uppercase. Now expect upper to equal learn Cypress. Since we're still in scope, we can use text again to assert the original text. And here it is. Here we are typing, enter, get the first one, invoke text, expect learn Cypress to equal learn Cypress. Here's the second assertion that captures the original text. It's not uppercase. cy.wrap is your bridge to the Cypress world. I've also had to use this when jumping into jQuery using filter and other jQuery or JavaScript commands. It takes a non-Cypress object and brings it into the command queue. Here's an example of that. Get the first one, call it label. Label should have text wrapped to do. So we are getting the first to do label and calling that label. So label should have text wrapped to do. This will fail because label is not a Cypress object at this point. Here in the case of wrapping, getting the first, then label, just like we did up here, except we're not trying to make assertions on a non-Cypress object. Here, we wrap it, and this brings a non-Cypress object back into Cypress. That's the only difference. Now let's see what this looks like. All right, here's our test. You can see label.should. So label.should is not a function, which is, not great, but it's a type error because label is not a Cypress object right now. Here's the successful case. Wrap to do enter, get to do list item, just like up here, get the first one, to do list first one, wrap, and now it's a Cypress object we can run assertions on in Cypress. Don't just wait for APIs, command them with CY, intercept, and request. This is a great one. I've used this a lot, especially on UIs with conditional formatting, where I've had to use CY intercept to change a payload for it to be processed by the front end to show conditional errors like offer expired or whatever it may be. CY request is also great for creating data, modifying data directly in a database. So you can hit the API just as easy as Postman. And here's our long-ish example. Here we can see uses intercept to force an error in the UI. So we're intercepting a regular to-do. This basically just logs it and puts it in memory and names it. This actually waits for it. So we reload and then we wait for this API. And when we do see it, it changes the value. Then we CY get intercept to have length of 0. So up here, clear all to-dos, visit, add a to-do. So there should be one in the UI. But when we intercept the call that would normally list out all of the to-dos, we are giving a status code. So we will show 0 to-dos because this call will never have actually reached our database. Intercept to-dos as empty. So same thing, should be one to-do present, but we are intercepting the to-do endpoint and we are erasing the entire payload and sending an empty array. Should be length 0 still. So we're waiting for our named intercept and then we'll see 0. CY request here is a little different. We can actually request, send a post request or a get or a delete to a certain endpoint with a valid payload and also any authentication if that's your thing. And we can verify its status should equal 201. This isn't necessary, but this is what's happening. Here we should see seeded to do. This is a great alternative to a data seed file because you can create test data on the fly. This is a really great solution when you're trying to manage data processing. A lot of read requests, a lot of write requests in your database. It's intense. This sort of mellows that out a bit by only creating what you need when you need it. Use CY request to clean up data. So here we can delete the to-dos. So if there are a bunch of random to-dos present and you should have none present, then you can use a request to delete things, clean things up, and that will show a length 0. These two here are also how I like to add data to the database with API commands, which we will see soon. Here's what the intercept and requests look like in practice. So in our before hook, we are adding a to-do and then waiting for our endpoint. We see it. There's a 500 error. Get the to-do list. Should have a list of 0. Same thing here. We have one added. We wait for the to-dos endpoint. We insert our empty arrays, which is called empty to-dos, and we should see none. CUI request now to create something. So this isn't waiting for anything. This is creating a request. Here's a response. So we successfully created a to-do. And there we go. Seeded to-do was created. Here is the delete request. So our before hook again creates one. We are deleting one in the test. Successful. Now in the to-do list, there should be nothing. Expected undefined to have length of 0. Custom commands are your best friend for dry code. I do like custom commands a lot. I thought it was pretty handy when I first started learning about them. I started making everything a custom command. It was really great. I like to now use custom commands for global actions or actions that span multiple pages. So if it's a command that happens only on one page, I typically don't create a custom command for it. I create a page action for it. If it spans multiple pages, then I create a custom command for it. I also, as a bonus here, like to separate the API commands and separate the custom commands. So you will see in a lot of my code bases a CUI login by UI or login by API. This is because API commands are generally faster and UI commands only really need to happen when you're testing something. Here you can see in one of my projects an API commands login by API, create event by API, and in my commands file would be login by UI. This helps to just keep things easier to use when you are implementing these commands in your tests, especially as projects grow. Structuring for scale. Use page object models from the start. Even if it's a small project, get things organized and add these page level functions to make your code more maintainable. Here in one of my projects, you can see forgot password page. The actual page object here, forgot password page, URL. So forgot password page.url would give you this. Elements, forgot password page.elements.credential input would give you this Cypress object. Here we have some functionality, fill in form. This .elements.credential input .type credential. So we are passing in a credential, which is a string. We're not returning anything, but we are filling in the form. And we also have submit form. I like to have fill in form and submit form separate because these are two different scenarios that could happen in testing. Filling in a form and checking for field validations, just like submitting form, checking for field validations without filling in the form. Handy stuff. Also, success message, error message. Separate your data with fixtures and factories. Cypress makes this really easy to use. Don't hard code data in your tests. You can, but it's better to have them somewhere centralized so that everyone can find them. Here's what that could look like with fixtures. Forgot password message, login message. So typically these would be sets of values that are unlikely to change. In this project, I had a little fun and did something new, which was hard coding my error messages. So that's what these are. Forgot password messages, validation message, user not found. That's what this would be. So these are all hard coded because these are unlikely to change. And if they do change, we can just update them all here. Same thing with login and sign up. Factories, on the other hand, are a little bigger. Event data, start date, end date, start time, end time, name, description, location, when, right? So this creates dynamic random data that falls within a range. We can also create event data out of range. With fixtures and factories, how do we use these? Let's go have a look. Let's try forgot password. Here we can see forgot password test, invalid user, forgot password fill in form with an invalid credential, messages here, cy.fixture, authentication, forgot password messages. We call those loaded messages. call those messages equal loaded messages dot forgot password. That would be the forgot password text, which when entering invalid credentials, it displays an error message when using invalid credentials. Forgot password, fill in form with an invalid credential, submit form, page element error messages should be visible. So we are going to see that error message. Look how nice that looks. Here we can see a create invalid event test. Create event data is here, and this works because my factories, I write them so they can take in optional arguments, and name in this case would be blank, which would overwrite the default value in that factory. Generate event data is up here, and it's my event data factory. So here we can see an invalid event is created. Here we can see name. It's going to be a string. Here's my overrides in case I want to override anything. You can also do this inline per field, but this is how I have it. Validate API schemas with a library. So we can check APIs as we saw in these other tests, but I would recommend a package like Sebastian's package, Schema Validator, which is really handy, really easy to use. Here's his Schema Validator NPM page. Very in-depth stuff here. This is handy if you have really elaborate APIs, something like a banking platform. Another shout out to Gleb and Philip. I would definitely check this out if my application was API heavy or had these gigantic API objects here that needed to be checked regularly. Create custom logs for crystal clear debugging. Try that tongue twister before reading on. When you call an API in a custom command, the Cypress runner doesn't always log it clearly. So I've gotten in the habit of adding my own logs, which really help things out a lot. Here's an example. My API log. So I make a request to to-dos to see how many there are. This request doesn't exactly say what happened unless you dig into the console, but my log does. No to-dos found. Visit, request, get a response. To-do added successfully, default to-do item. So I've successfully added a to-do and then reload. So these two logs here are helpful. If there's one found, here we can see getting to-dos, log one to-do found, deleting with ID. So it's telling you which to-do it's deleting. You can also just put plain text. I like to also do a completed deleting one to-do, right? So very explicit logs. Let's take a look at the code. Here is our API commands and clear to-dos via API. No to-dos found if there are none. If there are some, tells you how many. Deletes to-do with ID. You can also use to-do name if that's better. But typically I search for a lot of things by ID, not exactly their text. Also adding a to-do, right? To-do added successfully. To-do.title. This has been a really great habit for me when creating test data on the fly or trying to locate records, find one record and do a .then to go into the next set of records and link an ID with a new table ID and find an associated record. And it can get a little crazy. And that's why these logs are important to me and how I work. Install a reporting tool for visibility. So the default Cypress dashboard is good, but for team-wide visibility, there are a lot of other tools out there, like the one I created, QA Shadow Report. QA Shadow Report is compatible with Cypress. I also expanded it for Playwright, and this sends all of the Cypress test results to Google Sheets, so your team can basically have access to one Google Sheet, and you can all edit, write notes, priority, what's the status, right? You have a manual case ID, how long it took to run, the type of test, smoke, usability, functional, what team it belongs to, what area, getting started, to do, and then the individual test name. So what it block it was part of. Then pass failed. Some good metrics up here. Smoke test passed, functional test pass, marketing test pass, skip pass fail rate. Good stuff. Weekly summary. Monthly summary. Metrics and visibility is what it comes down to in an easy to use platform. Also CSV, if your company is secure and you can't use Google for whatever reason, you can get these daily reports in CSV format. It's the same thing, same metrics. This will help make Cypress more useful right out of the box day one. Get some reporting so your team can actually use what you're building. Interactive test runner. Cypress has a great UI. It does a lot for you. Here you can see all the actions as they take place in time. So if you need to debug something, say, what is it actually clicking on? What's actually happening when that loads? What happens after I press enter? Right, you can see before state, after state. This UI is so helpful. Testing for compliance and accessibility. Cypress is great just for running UI tests, but it can also dig deep into element attributes and compare things, help your team with maintaining your accessibility compliance. You can code these tests by hand, which I have done, or something easier is to use Sebastian's Cypress accessibility plugin, WIC A11Y. Here it is. Really easy to use plugin, lots of details, installation, compatibility, configuration. You can also create reports, and it will send you an HTML report with screenshots, basic usage. Check accessibility. This is what your accessibility text will look like in your spec. This one simple line, and this checks so many things. You can also specify severity levels, disable report generation, so many options. Here you can see the offending elements highlighted to their degree of urgency. Check it out. Here is what an accessibility test could look like. Very basic. If you're not using Sebastian's accessibility package, we can tab, make sure navigation is set, make sure color contrast is correct, text versus color, different backgrounds can be compared, element visibility. Let's see what this looks like. Okay, here it is. To-do list label, expect label to have attribute 4. This is just a demo. Elements should have some attribute, aria, label, anything. This is for a demo though, so that's why this is like that. Here's our other test, our keyboard navigation test, which would be compliant. Press the tab key, we are on the next element. There we go, type. There it is. You can add a to-do with keyboard alone. Compliant. Get to-do, get the first, get text not equal white. So we're getting the background and making sure the background is not the same color as the text, which is compliant. There is a certain range that's acceptable in compliance, but this is just to show that it's possible to do it. It's possible to make those comparisons. And some advanced knowledge. Understand Cypress's built-in retries. So Cypress already retries when you get element. There is a built-in assertion like dot should exist in this element. So cy.get element dot should exist, and then whatever you chain after it. It's a little sneaky, a little hidden, but this is how Cypress does it, and it's possible to overwrite the built-in assertion. Shout out to Gleb for that hint. In my commands here, this is what it looks like to overwrite. So you are getting a to-do, which would be the class name of an element on a page. If there are no to-dos, Cypress will automatically retry this with its own built-in .should assertion. If that element is not found, this entire block will fail on this one command here, and none of this other code will run. What you can do, if you're not sure that this is going to exist or not, you can sort of hack the built-in assertion by adding your own assertion to it. So chain an assertion. cy.getToDo.should, and instead of saying not be visible or be visible, you pass in an anonymous empty function. And that sort of cancels out the built-in assertion here. So cy.getToDo could be 1, could be 0, could be a million. Should, then. So even if it's 0, instead of failing, we are capturing it. Then we're saying const count to-dos equals to-dos.length. This is now an object outside of Cypress because it's not wrapped, but we can do .length on it. And that's our count. So if our count, now we're doing logical actions here, right? Putting it all together. We can also use it in logs. We can use it in a for each. Then we wrap. Once we have a positive number, we then wrap to perform more Cypress actions on that. So we're taking this object all the way from here, all the way down, wrapping it, and then doing some more Cypress functionality on it. This is really handy for elements when you're not sure if they are going to exist or if you want to count them and it could be 0 and you just don't want things to fail. Typically, tests should be deterministic in some way, and this is not always a great practice. This is sort of a workaround, but I found it helpful, and so I use it. Use Cypress real events for true user interactions. You'll probably need packages. This is one of the packages, something for a drag and drop. Uploading images, right? Drag and drop, or testing security, drag and drop, things like that. And the last one is to read the docs. I definitely am a big doc reader. Cypress docs have gotten so much better. They've always been great, but they're only getting better. And they also contain code samples. So length, class, value. They give you examples, even chained, so you can see how to use things in a more elaborate way. Lots of good stuff in here. And that's it. My 20 things I would tell myself if I was learning Cypress all over again. I would get started in these, make these part of my workflow from day one. Special thanks again to Gleb. I used his to-do list for this demo. Go ahead and check him out. Check out Philip. Check out Sebastian. Great content creators. Great with Cypress. And happy coding. Thank you.